Welcome back. So, in the video, we saw that Kohlberg had 6 stages of the development of moral thought. And as I stated previously, Kohlberg also has levels. And for every 3 levels, they have 2 stages in each level. And it's important to understand that Kohlberg's levels, they are age related, and they occur based on they don't occur at the same time. They occur one after the other. It's also important to note that reasoning at the higher stages, when we talk about stages 5 and 6, especially 6, are usually rare. So let's take a deeper dive into looking at Kohlberg's levels of the development of moral thought. The first level of moral thought is the pre-conventional reasoning, and that the first 2 stages are included in the first level of moral thought, which is the pre-conventional reasoning. Usually, children before the age of 9 use this pre-conventional reasoning. The pre-conventional reasoning is where children understand good and bad in terms of external rewards and punishments. So, for example, in the video, we looked at we saw that the person in stage 1 did not want to intervene in the fight because they felt that they would get in trouble. So they thought that they would be punished, and based on this pre-conventional reasoning, they did not intervene. The next level is the conventional reasoning, and this usually occurs by early adolescence. And actually, a lot of adults are actually in the conventional reasoning level of moral thought as well. This is where children, adolescents, and adults that are in this stage, that they understand that there are certain standards. The standards are set by others, and because there are certain standards that are set by others, they should just abide by these rules. They don't really question why these rules are in place, and they just abide by these rules. But by early adulthood, there are actually just a small number of people that are in a post-conventional reasoning. In the post-conventional reasoning, those were stages 5 and 6, and we looked at the principal or the chancellor of the school in the video, and he explained that the rules were based on the understanding of justice and moral reasoning. And so with post-conventional reasoning, you're really looking at how rules are, how they came to pass, and are they actually based on justice? Are they based on justice for only certain people? And are the rest of the people just fall by the wayside? So it's really using your critical thinking skills to understand and explore different options of morality in the rules, and try to come up with ideas about what would be rules that would be better for all people. Again, not everyone reaches this level of reasoning, this post-conventional reasoning. So those are the three levels of moral thought. Just as Piaget believed that children and adolescents and adults move through the levels of moral thought through peer relations, Kohlberg also stressed the importance of peers. He believed that, just like Piaget, when children interact with peers, that gives them a chance to engage in perspective taking, and that should and or may advance moral reasoning. But of course, with Piaget, Kohlberg also had some criticisms. For example, this section we're talking about moral thought, but a lot of people believe that he placed too much emphasis on moral thought. Kohlberg didn't really pay too much attention to moral behavior. Another criticism of Kohlberg is that culture was not, Kohlberg didn't take into account culture and how that influences moral development. And as I always talk about, we don't live in a vacuum. And so culture really plays a role in everything, including moral development. If you live in a society that is more community oriented, if you live in a society that's more individualistic oriented, then that would influence your moral development. That also is going to influence uh, your interactions with others, and that the importance that you place on interactions with others and how that influences your moral development. And also, another criticism is that Kohlberg actually placed too much emphasis on peer relations and not enough on families. And so, overall, we have Kohlberg and we have Piaget, and they placed emphasis on this is more into the moral thought. But the next stage that we're going to talk about, as far as moral development, we're going to chat about moral behavior. And so, of course, when we talk about behavior, we are looking at what can be observed. What are some of the basic processes that are responsible for the development of moral behavior? What can we see? What behaviors do you engage in that would explain if you are morally, if you abide by the rules, if you are developing morally or not? And that's what we're going to look into. And so there are basic processes of moral behavior. We have three basic processes. We have reinforcement, we have punishment, and we have imitation. All of those processes affect how individuals learn moral behavior. So, for example, when you have behavior that is reinforced, that is consistent with the laws of the land, someone is likely to repeat the behavior. Reinforcement is anytime you reinforce a behavior means that you want that behavior to happen more. On the flip side, if you have a behavior, but that behavior is punished, meaning that you want to decrease the amount of times that person does that behavior, then that means that someone may be more likely to not repeat that behavior. They may be likely to choose another behavior. The effectiveness of reward and punishment, it depends on not only the timing. So usually if you are given a reward or punishment right after, then that is going to have a stronger effect on the behavior. But also the reward and punishment has to be consistent. If you do something according to the law one day and then you are rewarded, but then you do something the next day and you are not rewarded, if it's not consistent, then the effectiveness of this reward and punishment, according to understanding and developing moral behavior, is not going to be as effective. It's also important to remember that behavior is situationally dependent. Because anything can happen in the world. You can be in so many different situations. And so the behavior, again, is situationally dependent. And also, what is also important to know is that because behavior is situationally dependent, individuals don't actually display moral behavior in different situations consistently. Like I said, behavior is really dependent on situations. Something else that is important when we talk about moral behavior is a mentor. And usually when children and adolescents, they are provided with a mentor that behaves morally, then individuals usually may be more inclined to behave morally. So the impact of a mentor is apparent. That mentor can behave morally or they can behave immorally. Both of those can impact children's inclination to behave or misbehave morally. Going deeper into moral behavior, we have the social cognitive theory. And The social cognitive theory makes a distinction between moral competencies and moral performance. So when we talk about moral competencies, that would take a deeper dive into moral thought, and that is seeing if individuals are even capable of obeying the rules. Are they aware of the rules that are and regulations that are the law of the land, or maybe rules at school, rules at home, rules when you are out in public compared to being at home? Do children even have the cognitive ability to construct this behavior? All of this would fall under moral competencies, but moral performance is another word for moral behavior. So are you going to actually act on the are you actually going to act morally, or are you going to act immorally? And that's usually, like I said, determined by motivation, rewards, incentives, or punishments. And it's also important to note that just because someone has the cognitive skills to behave morally, that does not mean that their behaviors are going to be moral behaviors. So there can be a difference between moral competencies and moral performance. They can be at odds, or they can be the same. If a person is competent in understanding rules and regulations, then they may actually perform morally. But sometimes people may know rules and regulations, but they still may not perform these moral behaviors. So it's important to note that moral competencies and moral performance can differ. They do not have to be aligned with each other. Okay, the next set of slides we are going to discuss moral feeling. I'll see you all on the next slideshow.